Anyway, a warm welcome to everyone, and it's good to see some new faces this morning. Ella Young is one of our newer members who's become a regular attender at our Connect on Thursday sessions, and she's given us a number of presentations and has promised to give us a session in October on the Galapagos Islands as well. So thank you for that, Ella. She's an active environmental campaigner, and she's taken a number of courses in Exeter, including one on horticultural and one on creative writing. Ella is a group organizer of our new discussion group, and she belongs to one of our book groups and poetry reading. Passionate about birdsong, Ella is hoping that she can organise a dawn chorus walk for our members next April and May. And as I know some of you get up early, I'm sure you'd like to join Ella next year for that wonderful treat of knowing what birds you're actually hearing. So thank you very much, Ella, this morning. I'm looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Well, I hope you're not going to be disappointed at this, because like Michael Morpogo and many other people, I absolutely love birdsong, but I'm afraid there's only three kinds of words, which are come and be my partner, keep away from my wife, and get off my land. So it's not really very romantic what the birds are singing, even though we really enjoy it. And I'm not really a twitcher. So what I'm going to talk about is just things that I've seen in my garden, things that I've got off the internet, and particularly this book, which gives all the naughty details of the sex lives of birds. And unfortunately, it's out of print. It was published in 2004, but it is available secondhand. So if you want to know more, that's the one that I recommend. I have added just a few soundtracks, but they're not very clear, people have told me. And there are lots and lots of dawn chorus videos and audios on YouTube. And I'm wondering whether I can try and be a cuckoo for you. Let's just try it. Or maybe an owl to start with. That's the tawny owl, and it's as easy as blowing into a bottle. I'm just blowing into my hands. So let's just try the cuckoo. And one more, which I haven't got on video. And I'm sure you recognize that as the wood pigeon. My mother always said they were singing, "You are so stupid." So you had to think what you're doing that's stupid. Now, this is another little bird whose name is just the same as its song, which is chiff-chaff. So we've got cuckoo, chiff-chaff, and this one, which used to be very common when I was a child, still around, peewit. And I'm sure you can think of lots of other birds where their song is their name, like curlew, hoopoo, lots of others. So you've already seen that some birds make their call or their song just by blowing, like the wind on the top of a bottle. And some of them have fantastic vocal cords, like our blackbirds and nightingales, and some just hammer on a tree, like the great spotted woodpecker, or rise up in the air and do little aerial displays. The peewit is one, the snipe is one, even pigeons and our collared doves do aerial displays. Anyway, let's start with calls, because calls are just communication. They may be on migration, it may be now, like, watch out, there's danger, here's food, keep up, where are you? And calls go on throughout the year. I'm not very good at them. Nigel Pinhorn, who does nature walks, seems to know every single call of every single bird, but it's much more difficult to identify them. And there's our friend, the wood pigeon. As well as just making its song through blowing, wood pigeons and collared doves and other members of that family are the only ones who can drink properly by sucking up. If you watch birds at your bird bath, they dip their beaks in and then tip their throats up, and gravity sends the water down, but pigeons and doves can properly drink by sucking. And there's the collared dove, very polite little dove, first seen in Britain in 1952. Amazing how they've spread. Now, I said that calls are throughout the year, and basically songs are in spring, giving the messages of sex and property. But that's not true of the robin, because robins sing right through autumn and winter. And not only the males sing, but the females sing as well. So if you hear a robin singing in the winter, it could be a female or it could be a male. But then in the spring, they become nice little wives and stop singing, and it's the males that hold the territory. Now, this intelligent looking jackdaw is one of the group of birds that doesn't have yes, he's looking really intense. He doesn't have the proper syrinx vocal cords. So all his friends and relations, rooks, crows, magpies, jays, they can only that kind of noise. So even though they're so intelligent, they really can't sing. Let's come on to my favorite songster, the blackbird, which has now got young. And I'd like to look at two of its calls that have been quite well studied. I'm sure you know one. It's when there's a cat or a magpie around in the garden, and they go like this. And you know there's something wrong. And you can make a recording, not a sound recording, but a sonogram. And this is a sonogram of the blackbird's alarm call when it wants all the other birds around to know where the danger is. There's a magpie here, or there's a cat here, or come and mob an owl here. But the other call the blackbird has, the alarm call, is when there's an overhead predator, like a sparrowhawk or perhaps a buzzard, and it's completely different. And you see here that the frequency is very narrow and the call is very long. And this means that birds around get the warning call, but they don't know where the blackbird is, and nor does the predator. So lots of different calls with different meanings. Let's have another one of my favorites. Let's see if you can hear the singing, the song thrush. And the interesting thing about the song thrush is it sings everything 2 or 3 or 4 times, as you'll hear. So I want to tell you about some research on the song thrush. These bird researchers are very, very patient, and somebody stayed up from dawn until dusk recording how often the song thrush was singing. And this song thrush was already mated. So what he was singing was "Keep away from my wife and stay off my land," only to other thrushes, because all birds have different feeding habits and they only defend their territory against birds of the same species. Anyway, he found that amazingly, this mated song thrush was singing 60% of daylight hours. So it's almost equivalent to you singing for 9 hours a day. So just imagine the energy that takes. So while the females are using their energy to lay the eggs, and obviously later feeding the young, the males are using a huge amount of energy. So 60% of the time. So then this researcher misnetted Mrs. Thrush and took her away. And so he was now calling for a new mate. you know, come and be my partner. I've got a lovely territory. I'm strong. I'll help feed your young, and so on. And then the song thrush was singing 80% of daylight hours. So it's interesting to know how much is just defending the territory and how much was attracting a mate. I mean, he couldn't sing 100% of the time because he had to feed as well. Now, the great tit, which I'm sure you know well, is probably one of the most common birds, certainly in my garden, and it has a rather monotonous song, which John will hear us later. It goes, teacher, 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 and really gets on my nerves. And you can tell the male from the female. The male has a much thicker black line down its chest than the female. And I've noticed when they come on my feeders, the male always goes first, and then he lets his wife have a turn. So it's me first rather than after you. I have to say, on the feeder, the collared doves are the most polite. They're always after you, our recent immigrants. So the great tits song, I think, has been studied, and calls has been studied more than any other. And they certainly have at least 40 different calls. And I want to tell you about some research that was done quite a long time ago, in the days of reel-to-reel tape recorders, by a man called John Krebs in Oxford. I think it was done in the 50s and 60s and published in 1971. So what he did was to map out territories in a little wood near Oxford, and each one of these circles is the territory of a great tit. And I'm afraid I don't know what, I guess they're 2 different years, what the shaded ones are, but you'll get the idea. So, and with his tape recorder, he recorded the songs of every great tit in that wood separately. And then he misnetted them all, so caught them in misnets and caught their spouses. So the whole wood was completely empty of great tits. And then in some territories, he put back the song on his tape recorder, and in others, he left them completely silent. And within 2 hours, the silent territories had been reoccupied or been occupied by a new male. So that really proved how tremendously important it is for birds to keep singing to maintain their territories. And I know with me, the right-hand side of my screen is cut off by pictures of me and various people. But the top right-hand territory, particularly in the right-hand map, is very big. And he discovered that some great tits actually have different songs that they sing at different boundaries of their territory. So other tits think that it's 2 or 3 birds, and in fact it's one bird singing different songs in different parts of the territory. And these are obviously big, energetic birds which will rear a lot of young. And I think it's generally believed that birds that sing loudest and longest and best are the strongest, are the best mates, and will rear the most young. So very interesting research. Now, the nightingale, the cuckoo, the skylark, they've all been much celebrated in music and poetry. But I think Beethoven pinched a bit of the chaffinch's song. I don't know if you know the chaffinch's song, but this is what I think Beethoven pinched. Da 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 dillium. Okay, da 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 da, because this is da 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 dillium is the chaffinch's song, and here it is as a sonogram. And a very interesting research was done on the chaffinch to try and find out whether birds know their own song innately or whether it's learnt from their parents or other males around the place. And so they hatched chaffinch eggs in an incubator and kept them completely insulated, sound insulated from the bird world. And the chaffinch could do the basic song without ever having heard it, but not all the twiddles. So again, another very interesting piece of research. Right, now this little bird, the wren, the smallest bird, but with the loudest voice, is not quite as bad as the cuckoo, but he's a pretty lazy father. What he does, he builds about 10 rough nests called cock nests, and then sings his beautiful song. I think it's, somebody counted, it's 103 notes in 4 seconds, very loud and very, very fast. And if you slow it down, it's as beautiful as a blackbird song. And when a female comes along, he shows her his nests, and she might look inside and decide he wasn't worth it and fly off, or she might go in and tidy up the nest, make it her own, mate with him, in which case then he'll go off and look for another female and gather his harem. And whether he has one or many wives, he won't help feed the young at all until they leave the nest. So a polygamous and not very hardworking father is the wren, for all his wonderful singing. And that's various different wren's songs from a town and a suburb and the country. What I think is so wonderful about birdsong, because I've done a lot of cycling in France and the Czech Republic, that wherever you are, you can recognize bird songs. And I've heard nightingales singing in the daytime in the Czech Republic and France. I've never heard them singing at night. Right, now this little bird, the dunner, called the hedge sparrow, now she knows just what to do. She holds the territory and she picks her husbands. And if she's attractive and has a good territory, she might have 2, 3, 4 husbands, and they all have a pecking order. And if husband number 4 wants to mate with her, he's got to make jolly sure that husbands number 1, 2, and 3 are not watching. So she does very well, because who knows who fathered all her chicks, but she has 3 or 4 males helping her feed them. So she is on the right side of the labor schedule. A squeaky little song, not very interesting. And this is just to say, please don't use poisonous slug pellets, because it can kill both thrushes and hedgehogs. There are environmentally friendly ones. Myself, I don't use any. I rely on my thrush and my hedgehogs. And the other reminder with this picture is that birds have to eat snail shells to get enough calcium carbonate to make their eggshells. If you kept chickens, you have to give them grit so that they have enough calcium carbonate to make eggshells. So that's important. Birds can't go on laying egg after egg without a source of calcium carbonate. So let's come on to the territories then. And it's interesting, not all birds have territories, and it's really where there's a very rich source of food close to the nest. And I've already showed you pictures of, we've had blackbirds and robins and so on, so I'm not going to have all of them. This absolutely beautiful bird is in my nesting box. And I'm wondering if it's a mixed marriage, because sometimes it's a great tit going in and out, and sometimes it's a blue tit. Last year they were blue tits, so whether, I don't know, I'll have to, they're so quick going in and out, it's hard to see. This is a blackcap, and he arrived about 2 weeks before he started singing, but his wife here was here the whole winter feeding on my fat balls. And he has a rather kind of jerky but attractive little song. And here's the chaffinch. Now they're, even though they've got thick beaks like seed eaters, they actually feed their young on insects, and they're very territorial. they will build their nests and keep all other chaffinches out. And my favorite, the long-tailed tit. I'm sure if you have birds in your garden and if you feed them, you'll notice in the winter, they're always in big groups, 10, 12 or more. And then they do split up into little groups, into pairs for the breeding season. And they have kind of vague territories inside the feeding territory of the winter flock. And they don't really sing and defend a territory. And I can't resist showing you this, which luckily wasn't from last Monday, from the storm, which is a nest that was blown down. And you can see it's beautifully made of lichen and moss and feathers held together with spider's webs. So it's elastic. And somebody once had the patience to count the feathers and found 2,000 feathers used in a little nest like that. So they do often fall out and break, and they're very family-minded birds, and they will go and help their siblings. So often you have aunts and uncles helping to feed the young, as well as the actual parents. So very community-minded birds. And they need such a lot of food, these youngsters. I can't remember how many thousand caterpillars a day. So who doesn't need territory? And these are the seed eaters and the communal nesters. So greenfinches, which have a kind of wheezy song, they can't possibly find enough seeds in one territory. They nest communally with lots of other greenfinches in the same tree or the same area. They leave their young for quite a long time and go hunting. And then they sick up sort of regurgitated, half-digested seeds as pigeons do, and those squabs the monks used to keep in the old days in their dovecots. Goldfinches also nest communally, and they are very late breeders. They tend to breed in August because the best food for feeding their young are thistle seeds. This isn't actually a thistle, it's a teasel, but they don't hold their own territory. And then, of course, the rooks, like the ones in Fear Park. Right, now, this is a question that, well, nobody really knows the answer. There's lots of answers. And of course, it isn't really a male voice choir because they're all singing different songs. So why is it at dawn? Well, these are some of the possible reasons. Birds may die in the night, particularly those very cold nights we had in April. So by singing, the bird says, I'm still alive and keep off my territory. Another reason is that eggs are laid at dawn, usually. And if you can imagine the process, the new egg has to be fertilized before the shell goes round. So when they've just laid an egg, female birds are very fertile. And then the song is, keep away from my wife. And if he's not there, it may be another male will come in and mate with her at that moment. So the males have got to defend their wives at that particular moment. Another reason is that for some, I'm sure you physicists will know, sound carries about 20 times further in the early morning, not just because there isn't traffic, but something to do with the quality of the air. So you can proclaim your territory over a large area at dawn. Another reason is that birds that feed on insects, because insects are cold-blooded, they won't be moving around at that time of day, and so it's hard to see them, though a sparrow is not having much difficulty finding aphids here. And the other thing is that the predators won't be around, or if they are around, they can't really see. So it's a good way to sing your song before the predators are up and around, or this might happen to you. Well, this is the big question. Do the early birds get the worm? And if it's particularly a damp night and a mild night, worms come out. They come out of their burrows, both to pull down vegetation and also to mate. So it's possible the early birds do get the worm. And my garden is by the railway line, by the Avocet line, and these are the birds that I have regularly in my garden. And it's not always the same order, but you can see the robin with big eyes is always the first, and the blackbird, and then through the list. And the greenfinch and goldfinches are not proclaiming territories, and they don't have to hurry because the seeds will still be there a few hours later. Often people hear robins singing at night and think it's a nightingale, because they are related and the songs are quite similar. So you probably know that in the old days, canaries were taken down the mines, and when the canary died, you got out of the mine. Now, I think the birds are our canaries, and this is a shocking picture. So it shows the decline in birds. In fact, in 1970, when we were all young, the bird numbers actually increased for about 10 years, and then they've gone down and down and down and down. So what's going to happen to us if these are our canaries? So let's just look at two. I know my time is nearly up. Look at two main reasons: the loss of food and the loss of habitat. Now, I'm sure you remember when we were children, teenagers, students, when you drove anywhere, the front of the car, the windscreen and the bonnet was absolutely covered with insects, especially those fatty ones. You had to, stop the car and clean the windscreen. Well, not now. So all those birds that depend on insect food are rather short. This is one that used to be very common in Devon, nesting in a friend's garden, the spotted flycatcher. It's a migrant from Africa, and it sits on a fence or a gate post and catches butterflies, of which there are many fewer, or flies, and goes back to its post. And also, because of climate change, it's arriving after the main source of food for its young is over. So this is one that's really suffering from loss of food. And the one suffering from loss of habitat is the nightingale. And amazingly, in the big rewilding project at NEP, before it started, there were 9 nightingale territories. And then after the rewilding, I believe there's nearly 50 territories. And we thought that nightingales like to nest in woodland, but they don't. They like to nest in thorny scrub. But thorny scrub, I mean, the farmers don't want thorny scrub. We can't go for a nice stroll through thorny scrub as we can through woodland. So we've been destroying the habitats that the nightingales like. So what can we do? How can we change the way we live? What will you say when your grandchildren say to you, what are you doing, Granny or Grandpa, to slow down climate change? Well, I really believe that every little helps, even how much water you put in the kettle to make a cup of tea. When you go shopping for veg, if you buy organic or if you buy veg flown from the other side of the world, if you've decided to eat less red meat or even become vegetarian, how we travel, using the car less. I think every little helps in slowing climate change. We haven't been very good stewards of the earth, and I think we can do better. Thank you. That's a spotted flycatcher. Absolutely lovely picture.
Thank you ever so much, Ella. That was absolutely fascinating. I learned so much, and you covered such a lot of ground in that period of time. But to see things from that perspective was really, really interesting. And thank you for such a comprehensive presentation. I was intrigued all along. I really was. Thank you. The floor's yours, everyone. If you'd, I'm just checking the messages, and I don't think we often find this with really good presentations. People don't have time to type questions because you lose the thread of what you're saying. So that's a mark of a triumph there, Ella. So there are no specific questions in the chat box. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please open your mic and join in the conversation, everyone.
It doesn't need to be a question. You know, if you've got interesting things happening in your garden, it would be lovely to hear about them.
Well, I'll start off then, because I'm fascinated about the robin. My dad used to live on a main road in Bristol, and there was a tree immediately outside his flat, which was pretty well lit up by a street lamp. And what was amazing is right through the night, and it seemed to be virtually continuous, a beautiful robin song. And I'm now wondering whether I'd falsely thought that it was the street lamp and the robin had been misled thinking it was daylight, or whether it's what you mentioned during your talk, Ella. Any comments on that?
I mean, you know, they've got very big eyes.
Yeah.
And you know, I suppose perhaps a new territory or something. I mean, they must sleep sometime if they're singing.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought it was just a very confused robin, but it gave us a lot of pleasure.
Ella, can I just say, in my garden, I have quite a cornucopia of food, but very few birds. I've got just a robin and one sparrow and blackbirds on the ground and pigeons, but none of the usual things yet. I don't know where they are. You know, it's a big garden with lots of hedges, and you know, normally I would have more birds feeding.
Have you got a cat?
No, and there isn't one, you know, very obvious at the moment in the, you know, in the territory.
Have you got seagulls? Because that's the problem we've got, because they're very territorial. And
no, they turn up when I've put food on the tray. They watch and they come for the food on the tray, but they're not there all the time.
Right.
No, and there is a family of rooks that sort of occasionally proceed down the garden and try and knock the food off, you know, off the stand, and then gobble it all. They go for the fat balls. But
I wonder if you have lots. I wonder if you have lots of neighbours feeding them, because I think that makes a difference.
I think it's true. I think you know, we are a sort of you know, big gardened area, and I do think other people are feeding, and maybe they're all full by the time they get near me.
Peter White, the radio presenter who's visually impaired, did one program where he said that he was quite reliant, obviously, on hearing the bird song, since he couldn't see the birds, and that what had happened was couldn't hear them anymore. And what they found out was that their neighbours were feeding the birds with better quality seeds. They'd lost the birds, unfortunately, because of the neighbours with better quality seeds.
Wow.
Sometimes it's due to a lack of a green corridor. So there's not enough greenery in between you and everyone else. What's that like? Have you got
there's gardens galore? Yeah.
Oh, right.
I think I'll have to buy mealworms. I think maybe they're, you know, they'd be interested in if we have mealworms. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Interesting. Ella, do you find that birds sing louder when they're near traffic noise? Because we live near a busy main road. Our birds sing ever so loudly, and I think it might be because they're trying to get above all the traffic noise, but I don't know. Is that correct?
Yes, I know somebody did research on nightingales in Germany and found that the ones who had territories near the motorway had to sing much more loudly. So I think you're completely right.
Yeah, this is true. BTO have done things like research on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only nightingales, it's most birds sing much more loudly in urban areas.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. You mentioned your observation about flies on cars, and
Yeah.
I was just wondering if there's any effect on the fact that modern cars are more streamlined. That's why I thought there was less of flies on cars.
Well, probably both, but they're definitely fewer. My daughter-in-law is from Slovakia, and her parents came over to stay with me for a while, and they said to me, "Why are there so few insects in England?"
Mm.
And I really had to think, and I thought, well, maybe we have wheelie bins, and maybe people pick up the dog poo, and maybe we don't have chickens. You know, they were mystified that there were so few insects in Devon compared with a small village in eastern Slovakia where they live.
They should go to Scotland in the summer.
Yes. Yes, I think, you know, what Christian was saying about wildlife corridors is very important. And I think, you know, even though I'm in a little flat with a ground floor garden, because I'm on the Avocet line and a lot of big trees which are on the railway line, I get a really good selection of birds. I think altogether I've had about 35 different birds. And I really feed just three things: peanuts, fat balls, and mixed seed. And it's absolutely true because when the first lockdown was on and I couldn't go to the RSPB shop at Darts Farm, I went to Plants Galore and got some fat balls, and the birds were not keen on those. And then when I got the RSPB ones, you know, and put them together in the feeder, the Plants Galore ones were not eaten. So, you know, they do have some taste.
Very selective.
I must upgrade. Yeah, definitely.
But I also think you have to be really careful about rats. I don't mind mice, they're wood mice, eating my bird food, and I often catch them at it. They're very quick. But I have had problems with rats because I make compost, and I'm really grateful for the pigeons because they eat up all the seeds the birds spill. And so even though I'm not terribly keen on pigeons, they do a useful job in that way.
Definitely.
Ella, I've got a question for you. It's not about Birdsong, but you may have seen in the newsletter for this month, there's a couple of photos that I took of wood pigeons nesting in Fear Park.
Yeah.
And what's been exercising my mind was that when I sent those photos in to John, what I said was absolutely true. The birds had fledged and left the nest, but the nest itself is over the pond, which has got newts in, and I've been photographing newts in there. And I noticed that very soon after the nest was abandoned, there was another one there, and so sort of 3 weeks on, and there's clearly another wood pigeon sitting in the same nest all the time, so they must have eggs under there. You're talking about having more than one wife and things. Do you think that's what's going on, or do some birds sort of lay eggs very quickly? I thought they'd be out feeding their young at the moment.
Well, I can only guess. I mean, pigeons do breed throughout the year. They don't particularly just breed in spring, and so I've no idea whether it's the same pair having weaned their young quickly. I've no idea whether another pigeon would use the same nest. I doubt it. Yes, I really have no idea. It's interesting, in my garden, there's a kind of love trio. There's two classic wood pigeons, and then there's a pigeon without the white on its neck, and they're billing and cooing as a threesome. I mean, day after day. I can't make out, you know, I think I know which is the male, who's one of the big ones. Whether the other two are both females, I've no idea. And as I said, I'm fascinated that I thought I had blue tits in my nest, and then yesterday I saw a great tit going in, and whether it was hoping the nesting box was unoccupied and it would use it, but it wasn't. It didn't leave straight away, which I would have thought. So many mysteries around us. And, you know, I've lived alone for 30 years, and you know, birds are my companions. They really fascinate me. And I've got a very tame blackbird who immediately notices the moment I'm up, and comes begging. He's now got young, and I was taking compost out of. I've got these sort of Dalek compost feeders, taking compost out and putting it for him. And then when I left the lid off, he's actually going in, you know, and getting worms, and then flying off. Just amazing. So I thought, well, I don't need to dig the worms for you. You can get them yourself. So very, and he will come up when I'm gardening, a bit like a robin. And I know it's meant to be just cupboard love for uncovering insects, but he really seems to, you know, whatever I'm doing, he'll hop around. Perhaps it's just cupboard love, but I enjoy it anyway.
Good.
Thank you.
Both, sorry, I can go on forever. Both Chris Packham and who else? Yes, Monty Don said the best thing you can do for wildlife in your garden is to let the grass grow. So I'm trying that. I've only got a little lawn, but I'm trying that for the first time this year. Chris Packham had an amazing program that was repeated on BBC4, looking at the gardens in a street, and the old lady whose garden was a total jungle, Christine's nodding, had much more wildlife than any of the well tended and neat and tidy gardens.
I think what was interesting about that one was, Ella, that the lady who had the completely wild garden, it didn't turn out to be the one with the most wildlife. It was one of the ones that was in between, that was slightly managed, that was the better one. It was a couple that they interviewed at the end. They were leaving some wild areas, but they were keeping some borders neat. Hers, they expected would attract the most, I think, but actually in the end didn't. So yeah, so it was a couple who sort of won that category of attracting most wildlife, because they'd got some wildlife areas in the garden, and a little bit of management. Yeah, so that was very, very interesting, I thought. He's fascinating, absolutely brilliant, because there's so much science going on there. And he's really sort of asking a lot of important questions and getting them answered. Yeah.
Thank you. I must have been asleep at that point.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, but yeah, that was the conclusion.
No, I do fall asleep even in front of interesting programs sometimes.
It's this busy life you lead, you see.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other questions, comments, observations?
Can I make a comment about the wild gardens? Plant Life are advocating no mow May, and at the end of the May, you're asked to do a survey of a square, a metre square on your lawn, to count all the flowers that are out and the insects. So
That's a good idea, Jennifer.
Well, that's a good idea. Well, we're almost a week into May, so there's only 3 more weeks to go. That's worth that. Yeah,
no,
save me mowing the lawn.
The survey is done at the end of May.
How interesting. Thank you, Jennifer.
Who did you say is doing that, Jennifer?
Plant Life.
Plant Life. Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Kamala.
Any other
thought? Yeah.
Pamela?
Can I ask a question which is completely... Yes, can I ask a question of you and anybody else who has advice? I feel really guilty about my plant feeder and how I wash it and how often I wash it. Does anybody, including Ella, of course, have any views on what you use to clean your feeders and how often you should do it, and what the dangers are if you don't, and to which birds in particular?
I think this is from what I've read. It's particularly the finches there's some disease, I can't remember what it's called, that they pass to one another from dirty feeders.
Monosis.
There you are. You know the answer to your question.
No, that's only one. That was a little while ago. I don't know if it's still affecting finches, but I believe there are lots. That's a little parasite. And I listened to a talk and saw a bird which was affected with it. And it was really quite grueling. It looked really ill. And then the speaker told us that what happens is that they try to swallow a seed and they can't, and they spit it out, which makes you feel even more sad. But I think there may be lots of other things that are infecting the birds if we don't wash our feeders properly. But I have no idea.
I think, feeders without trays are good, because then, stuff doesn't fall. And as I said, the pigeons eat it up. But I don't use any disinfectants, just hot water and washing up liquid. And I don't wash them as often as I should. I don't wash them every time I refill them.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else got any comments or questions?
I was going to say, could you not be too clean, perhaps? Because, I mean, birds are in the wildlife. They're eating things that, we wouldn't eat, obviously. But
the point you make about the tray is an interesting one from my point of view, and I'm sure with my neighbours, because we got overrun with rats around where I live. And most of us, the only conclusion we could come to was to stop feeding the birds, because that's what was attracting the rats. And I've been looking around for a bird feeder that had a wider tray under it, so that when they drop the seed, it doesn't go on the ground, because that's been the problem. I haven't actually got I've got a backyard, so it's actually on concrete, if you like, or something like that. They're falling on a hard surface. And the rats were, possible to control, particularly because we live near in our road just there's a big opening to the sewer, so I don't know if they make bird feeders with wider trays that would
they do and you can either go and look at Dart's Farm at the RSPB shop, or look online, because their website has got a bigger choice of feeders.
All right, I'll have a look. I haven't been able to find any, but I'll have a look. Thank you.
Ryan, part of the rat problem was because the hospitality venues were all closed, so they weren't putting out all the food scraps. So the rats had to come into gardens to get food.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard of that one. That's interesting. So they're just searching other sources.
Yes.
How
And that
fascinating.
should improve now that pubs and things are open.
Well, that's good. That's yet another good sign. Connie, did you have your hand up a moment ago? Do you want to unmute yourself? Just click the microphone sound on your tablet or computer. Are you on a tablet? If you're on a tablet, you need to press the center of the tablet, and then your microphone sign should come up. No, Joy?
Yeah.
Or you can type your question in the chat box if you prefer, Connie. We still can't hear you.
I think Susie's got her hand up. Have you, Susie?
Yes, she has.
Yes, Susie.
I have. Just on the compost heap, we had an invasion of rats about a couple of years ago, and we've always got to be very careful. And they came when they started to build. We live very near Withycombe Brook, and of course there's a lot of undergrowth and things, and they love it down there. But when they started to build, the rats were driven out a little bit, and we had a bit of an invasion. And so we had to get someone out. And what they said was, as far as compost heaps is concerned, because I found rats in my compost heap, but I had a cover over it, so it was a covered one. And they said, don't use the covered compost heaps. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, don't put eggshells in there, and don't put tea bags, because that's what they tend to go for.
Oh, wow.
Oh. Interesting.
Connie's
So I now I now have just wooden slats, a metre square wooden slats, and I build my compost heap up that way, and I have no problem. Had no problem since I started doing that.
That's fascinating, because I've got a Dalek with a lid on a concrete block, you know, because I thought that was the best way to keep the rats out. And I do compost eggshells and tea bags as well. The eggshells don't compost very fast unless you crush them. It's very small.
Fascinating. Right. Well, thank you very much, Ella, because you generated a lot of questions and a lot of comments and discussion, which is always a very good sign that we've had an informative and very interesting presentation by you. So thank you, because you've given us a number of presentations. So it's very generous as a new member that you've done that. And I like the way that your environmental side came out as well. That you made us think about our habitats and our gardens, or even just our backyards, how we're caring for the environment, which is very interesting. And I liked your little sound charts. They looked fascinating. And it was interesting to hear about the research that's going on as well. So that was good. And it'd be worth looking out for that book that you recommended as well. And the importance, as you say, about not using slug pellets, etc., so that we protect the environment for the thrushes in particular. And fascinating to hear about the birds when they're singing and how they sing, and all about their territories. Absolutely wonderful to hear the different sort of birds, and the robins singing throughout the day as well, which is wonderful, and the night. So brilliant. So if we can thank Ella in our normal fashion. Thank you, Ella.